Coming out with me while I dust off my old watercolor markers and make this cozy ghost by a fireplace. I have here a extremely large set of Arteza watercolor markers. I haven't used these, just telling by the dust on the top of them, for a very, very long time. I thought that since I'm kind of working on some cute, cozy, spooky illustrations / paintings, I thought I would actually go more full illustration style and work with my watercolor markers today. For this painting, I do have an outline sketch. I have a PDF, and I'll be sharing a link to the PDF in the description for the video. If you sign up for my mailing list, you can go ahead and download that for free so that way you can paint your own living room scene with this ghost. I have what I feel is an unlimited amount of markers to use here. So I'm going to put my color mixing skills to the test here and only work with a handful of colors. So I'm working mostly on primaries here. I'm trying to stick to kind of your red, yellows, blues, but I've got a couple other colors as well. So I've got this basic red. And then I've got this autumn red, which is highly appropriate. I have a grape purple, honey, acid yellow, royal blue, denim blue, and Arctic blue. And these are the colors that I'm going to be working with today. So without going into a full-blown 2-point perspective lesson, I will just share kind of how I did the guidelines for my living room. I have my horizon line, which is the viewpoint at which I'm looking, and then you can see my vanishing points. I've put one far to the left side of the paper, and then the right vanishing point is even further to the right. So I feel like it gives this kind of skewed perspective. I will say when I got to the chair, I kind of just winged it. I knew I wanted the chair to be facing forward and look larger, like it's directly in front of the viewer. So that's kind of what I went with that. So let's talk about all the different ways you can use watercolor markers when doing something like this. The first thing you can do is just use the marker itself. So without using any other tools to blend, you can add the marker straight to your watercolor paper. Now, as you can tell, it's pretty dark here. I'm not entirely sure that I want the ceiling to be that dark, so I am going to use some water to blend it out. You can tell too, at a certain point, the marker itself does get a little bit scratchy or dry, so you see a lot of that paper texture underneath. So since I don't want that, I am using water to blend it out. One of the pesky things about watercolor markers is they do tend to bleed a lot, even if they're completely dry sometimes. Just as an example, this isn't dry yet, but I can pull pigment and you can see it bleeding. And I'm just gonna keep pulling pigment down from that ceiling for what feels like an unnatural amount of time. I felt like I spent a lot of time on this wall because I just kept adding more of that blue and then just kept bringing it down. So I did want it to be darker in the ceiling and in the corners and then get lighter as I went down the wall. And I'm just layering in some shadows up here in the top corner just to add some interest. You may be able to tell that it doesn't take much for that color to completely disappear if you keep working at it. So if you want a sharp shadow or highlight, don't blend it out too much. So I'm going to take a break from the wall here and I'm going to start working on my fire. Rather than just using the marker itself, I'm going to use my ceramic well and I'm just going to dab the marker into the ceramic well and kind of release some pigment. If you keep working at it, the ink will start to pool in the ceramic well. So I know it doesn't look like much right now, but it does tend to accumulate in there. So I'm adding the yellow and then I'm using a brush with a little bit of water, my tiny brush, to blend out that yellow so I don't have any harsh edges. Same thing with this orange here. I'm going to add some pigment to the well and then I'm going to use my brush with water to blend that out, and you can see how soft that is compared to using the marker and blending it out. This red, if I had just drawn straight from the marker, it is super, super red. So this is one of those instances where I'm really glad that I just took a little bit from the well and then added some water to it and used my brush with it. I don't want it to be super duper bright or dark. So what about blending colors? So you can blend colors effectively a lot of different ways. You can do it on the paper, and I will show that at some point, but the easiest thing to do is to take the different colors into your well and blend them that way. That way you get yourself a consistent color from the start, you don't see a lot of streaking, and it's very, very soft doing it this way. So I run into an interesting dilemma here as I'm working. I'm trying to get some of that yellow pigment onto my ceramic well, and nothing seems to be coming out. So I may have accidentally dipped the tip in some water. It may just need a really good shake. But what I did decide to do was actually try to test it out on the tape surrounding my painting. And that actually did the trick quite well. That tape has a texture that holds that paint really well. And I even could dip my water in the brush a little bit, grab it from the tape, add it to the painting, and I can also do some mixing as well. So you'll see me go back and forth between using the ceramic well and actually using the tape for applying the pigment and blending. So now I'm gonna start adding some additional yellow highlights, like the ghost and the chair will need that bright yellow just to show that glowing light from the fire. If you've followed me for a little bit now, you know I really love bold and dynamic light sources and those really intense lighting effects, and I want to get better at that. So I'm doing this in an illustrative style just to see how I like that. I'm also going to start adding some of this yellow to the edges of the fireplace, around the inside, around where the fire is. I want to add a lot of different values of color on the stones and really add some like texture and dimension on the fireplace. I did leave this blank on my PDF just so people could do things different ways. If they don't like the stone, you could use brick or something like that. But the principle still applies. You want that yellow glowing kind of layer surrounding the fireplace, and then it will start to get darker as you get further away. Also want to make sure that I'm reflecting any of that light also on the ground. So now back to that effect of that really stark light to dark. I'm just taking my purple marker and I'm blending upwards, going from dark to light until I get to the end of that yellow highlight, and I'm stopping there. So I want to create some shape by making sure that there's some really good shading here and not covering up that light source. So again, just taking that dark base color and then just lightening it up, going from the inside to the outside. I'm going to try here to create some consistency in color. And then when I get to the ghost, I'm going to, starting from that highlight, I'm just going to work very, very lightly in that same purple color, because the ghost, while most ghosts are white, they're also translucent. So I want the color of the chair to kind of poke through the ghost without making him completely purple. I want him to be in front or sitting in the chair, but I still want it to reflect that the chair can be seen behind where he is. So while I'm waiting for some other elements to dry, I'm just filling in some of these other areas. Now for like things like the photo and the books and the plants and things, I'm not super meticulous about it. It doesn't need to be super detailed. I want most of the details to be in the main focal points, which are the fireplace and the ghost in the chair. Since I have a limited palette here, I'm trying to do a little bit of blending so that not all of the colors are the same. So you see, I do want to distinguish between the wall and the curtains, and then what's going on outside with the rain, with just slightly different color variations if I can. The great thing about picking mostly primaries here is I have some great options for blending. So for those little tiny plants up there, I can easily make a nice little green to fill that in, even though there's plenty of greens in my carrier of markers. I liked that I made my own green. When using the same variation of colors, it also helps guarantee the consistency in tone in the entire piece. It's all going to look cohesive. So now I start working on the stonework, and it's going to take a fair bit of layering. I definitely want there to be some red and some of the purple in here, and then there's going to be some color that kind of simulates the grout or whatever is holding those rocks together, cement most likely. Now I've gotten to work on some of the other aspects of the piece. I'm going back to the stones and adding a darker layer on the edges of the rocks. I'm adding some shading below the mantle just to simulate that it is above the fireplace. Then I'm going to attempt to let that dry a little again. But while I wait, I'm going to take this yellow and I'm just going to start brightening up some of these areas. So I feel like this fire could be a little bit brighter to go along with the highlights. So I'm just going straight in with that marker and blending those in. And you'll see, as I mentioned before with the red, I start going in with it and realize it is way too bright for me to start with that. So I do switch to the brush to lighten that up just a fair bit. For the cement or grout, I used brown and blue and a lot of water, and that lightened up to a really, really nice gray that I could use. And I really think that that did add to that fireplace. I do feel like it does feel more three-dimensional now than it did before. We can't forget the little book the ghost is reading, so we've got a little bit of yellow highlights, and then on the side that's not facing the light, we've made that darker. If you've stuck around long enough, you're going to get a pro tip about masking tape, because this stuff rips your paper. I do not love it. Here's what I do. I never pull straight up. I always go very, very slowly, and I pull at a diagonal angle. And that is very, very effective in making sure that your paper's not getting lifted up. So I'm just checking there to make sure that nothing got torn. So far, so good, right? This is always the scariest part, is pulling off this tape, and if something rips, you've botched the whole thing, right? So I'm being very, very careful, pulling from a diagonal, and staying close to the base of the tape really helps too. You don't want to go too far. The minute you start lifting up from the paper, the more likely it is you're going to rip this tape. Whew, we did it. And it looked so nice and crisp and clean with this nice big border for framing. I actually am quite happy with how this turned out, considering I am so afraid to use these markers for anything. I may use them again for a couple other projects while they're out. I hope that you learned some helpful tips about working with watercolor markers. Let me know in the comments what you would have done differently. Do you have any tips and tricks for me? And have you ever used watercolor markers before? Would you in the future now? And with that, I'm going to let you go for now, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.